Folks, my name is John Watson. I run the Evergreen Education Group, which in turn runs the Digital Learning Annual Conference, the Digital Learning Collaborative, I should say, which is a membership group. We focus, and the folks that we work with focus on K-12 online, hybrid, and blended learning. We've been doing that for a couple of decades now. And we are joined today by just a rock star panel that I'm thrilled to be sharing with you. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. We're here to talk about reimagining schools for students and families seeking new options. I'm going to just tee that up for a moment before we start to hear from the panelists. So we've known, those of us who have been in this space for a while, and I know that includes, I was looking at the attendee list. I know that includes quite a few of our attendees. We've known that traditional schools don't work for all students, and in particular, don't work for many at-risk students. So we've known that for a very long time. But one of the surprises as we think about the pandemic over the last few years and the emergency remote learning that was happening was finding that other types of students thrived in the flexibility of remote, virtual, and hybrid learning as well. And so what we're seeing now as we come out of the pandemic is that forward-thinking district and school leaders are taking those challenges and lessons learned from COVID-19 and what they had in place during the pandemic to offer new, innovative, and flexible models for students and families who we're seeing, for whatever reason, there's quite a few who don't necessarily want to go back to a traditional school. For some, maybe they just don't want to go back yet because they're still worried about COVID, or maybe this is a long-term change. It certainly is for some. We also know that in the past, a lot of in particular, the hybrid schools that we have studied tended to be and some of the most prominent hybrid schools, combining some online and some face-to-face instruction, tended to be in suburban, high socioeconomic status districts. And so part of the conversation that we want to have today is both about, hey, what does it mean to reimagine school? What does it mean to think about new models for students, for teachers, for families? And adding in the lens of what does it mean to be creating those options for all students, regardless of SES status and other demographic factors. So with that in mind, momentarily, I'm going to have the panelists start introducing themselves. I do want to mention again, we are watching the chat window, and if you have questions, please drop them in, and as well, if you have comments, anything that you are hearing that you might agree with or might question, please drop that in as well. We're all going to be watching. So now I'm going to start with some quick introductions from our panelists so you can get a sense for the experience and knowledge that we have in this group. Dan Milan, I'm going to start with you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone. My name is Dan Milan. I am an administrator here in Goodyear, Arizona, leading a hybrid school. I bring to you with about 30 plus years of experience, most of that in traditional learning or education in Pennsylvania, and then building out unique learning environments from there, including cyber labs, and then ideally that changing of the traditional classroom into the flexible learning environment, which is what brought me out here to Arizona.
Thank you, Dan. I didn't mention, by the way, Dan and I are sitting about 20 miles apart from each other. So I'm on the east side of Phoenix this morning, where it is still morning. And by the way, it's also finally gotten not crazy hot just in the last 2 days or so.
We're down from the triple digits.
Exactly. Marvis, I'll go to you next.
Oh, good afternoon, or this afternoon here. Hello, everyone. I'm Marvis McGowan. I'm the Executive Director of Valor, Ohio. I've got about 20 years of experience in education on various roles, and I'm just excited to be here.
Thank you, Marvis. Content, going to go to you next.
Good afternoon. It's afternoon here for me as well. I am Content Redmond, former district special education director in an online state charter school, and currently serve as a product manager in the education technology software development space. So I'm delighted to be here as well to speak to you all today.
Thank you, Content. Melissa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Sloan, and I have a variety of experience in this online and blended space, from being a special ed director to a teacher, and then now I lead the sales and services teams for StrongMind. So grateful to be here today. So thank you, John.
Thank you all for joining us. I've mentioned a couple of times there's tremendous expertise in this group, and I want to dig in a little bit into what you're doing now in your current roles and some of your background as well. I want to start with Marvis and Dan, because you're both running hybrid schools, but you're running, let's say, different flavors of hybrid schools. And I think it's really valuable to tease some of that out. Marvis, can you tell us a little bit about what does hybrid mean at your school?
Here in Ohio, it's an opportunity for students who are, for the most part, underserved and may not have a lot of options outside of the traditional brick and mortar school with the traditional way of doing education. This gives them an opportunity to do things like direct instruction, and also have using technology and supervised technology in order to do their assignments and get real-time results from these assignments. We are in a predominantly low-income community and have about 100% free and reduced lunch status for our students, but we want them to have the opportunity to have the same type of education experience and opportunities that more affluent communities have. So we're kind of like more of a blended kind of style versus the hybrid, in that we're not completely like one or the other. We're not here and doing direct instruction and then having to be elsewhere for the computer or technology part of it. We do that here. So we do everything all day here instead of, half a day here and elsewhere. And it works for this community.
Yeah, as I understand it, and I'll go to Dan next to talk about how Valor, Arizona operates. It's like some of the things where Dan's school splits between the on-site and the online with students accessing from home or elsewhere. You're doing that all within your school. But Dan, I need to turn this over to you before I start describing your school, which doesn't make sense. So you're on here, right?
Yeah, thanks for letting me have that. But so there are, Marvis, you're right. There are kind of two defining measurements of hybrid learning, right? So the first one is offloading what is complicated, mostly binary though, which is digital coursework that is really formative, that really supplies great data on, and then of course giving to the humans that complex task of working with kids, building relationships, and making sure that content gets elevated to something they can use in their lives. So that is one part of hybrid learning that you guys engage in immediately, Marvis, right? So that's what your school is built on, that offloading the content and then letting the teachers build relationships. And then the other side of it is some control over the pace and the place and the time and those pieces of it right there. So and in Valor, Ohio, and having been there quite a bit, Marvis, I know I've been out there with you. The need is that the students be there, be supported, that you physically create an environment for them that's safe. So just dumping hybrid on somebody and saying this is the way to do it is not what hybrid's about. It is the way forward. I truly believe that, I have no doubt. But what it is culturally and locally specific to the needs of the environment, so you adjust around that. So we here, for example, we run half days, like you said, John. We have 6th to 12th grade, and so middle school comes for half a day in the morning, Monday through Thursday, and then the afternoon they get to tutor with only those teachers they have. Those teachers they have in the morning do not teach in the afternoon; they just tutor, getting high level learning during the day, and in the afternoon, if they need help, they come get it. So our goal is to empower parents in that way. And then the high schoolers do the opposite of that. They're in the afternoon, they're here getting the high level learning in the classroom, projects, all those things that are built into our StrongMind curriculum and the lessons they get. And then in the mornings, they can come in for that tutoring when and if they need it. So it's really about empowering everybody. And Marvis does that same thing, offering the teachers that kind of control to read good data, to act on it, but also build what is necessary for where you live.
really valuable distinctions that you two are drawing, and particular, the idea comes out, hey, the local context is so critical, and the hybrid model allows for all, generally speaking, it's sort of an umbrella over a lot of different approaches. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that fully online is part of this mix too, and I want to go to Content next to talk about that, because Content, you've been thinking about fully online, some different populations of students, both in some previous positions and now in some different roles. Can you dig into that and unpack a bit what you've been working on and thinking about?
Sure. So one of the things that I love in my former experience as a district special education director, I worked in 2 different state online charter schools, which was kindergarten through 12. And that allowed a wide variety of students to be able to access learning. Students who were in migrant communities, as we noted, students who were in low SES areas, students where traditionally they did not have access to technology, students who were primary caregivers, and most notably for me as a special ed director, students with different learning needs. I like the ways that we've been able to visualize hybrid learning as it appeals to different modalities, especially in those spaces where children who may not do well with auditory processing, but then do well with some hands-on learning. The ability to have a hybrid and flexible model that allows self-directed learning and then teacher-directed guidance plus one-on-one sessions really does speak to that idea of leveling the playing field for children in that flexible learning space. Given the last 5 years of work that I've done, either as a district special ed director, as a consultant, or in working in development of educational technology, this idea of accessibility as it relates to using technology to create access continues to permeate and level the playing field for those students, not just students with learning difficulties, but our gifted student population as well. I've seen the positive impacts across those different special populations in my work. I see some applause there, so I think that
What is happening there?
I've never
resonated with
seen that.
someone.
I've never
got my
seen
hands
that.
right.
How do
It's
you
not me.
how do you do that? That was awesome.
Well, just to be clear, I didn't do it, but I thought it deserved applause. So
Sure.
I'm glad that somebody figured that out. Content, I'm gonna have some. I've got several follow-ups for you, but before we go into a next round of questions, Melissa, would love to have you comment. You're with Strongmind. Strongmind has been supporting some of these schools, and I know you've been thinking about the different aspects of instruction that comes into these different models, and I wonder if you'd like to comment on that.
Sure, thank you. It's just so great to be here and listen to all of our panelists talk about the ways they're utilizing online learning or blended learning or hybrid learning, really. And we are lucky enough to work directly with some of you, providing curriculum and other services, and we do that across the country. So our Strongmind value add is that we can help you whatever you're trying to do, who you're trying to serve. We can help you reach all your students. And also one of our biggest differentiators, I think, is the resources we put into supporting teachers. So teachers are the heart of instruction. We firmly believe that in the heart of all schools. And our goal is to help teachers really drive student success and community in their schools. And we feel really fortunate to be able to partner with so many school districts as they build their own custom solutions. And just really, that's our goal, just to partner and help you reach your goals.
We at the Digital Learning Collaborative have been on a journey with Strongmind, and in fact most of the people here on figuring out what hybrid is really, because it's an emerging area. It's not really something. I mean, the types of schools that Dan and Marvis, you're both running are relatively new in a field that's been around for a couple of decades now, but I think that hybrid space is where a lot is evolving. So it's incredibly valuable, and just having a lot of folks thinking about, okay, what do those particulars look like? I want to circle back to one of those specifics, and it's something that I mentioned in my opening. Marvis touched on it. when we look at the hybrid schools that are often held up as exemplars within hybrid learning models, that sort of thing, they do tend to be suburban schools serving high SES populations. And that has felt to us like a problem, right? Because Dan said he really believes that hybrid is the way forward for a lot of students. I believe that as well. So the idea that this really high potential instructional model is being disproportionately made available to the highest SES students seems completely backwards. It should be available to everybody and as much to low SES students as anybody else, if not more so. Marvis, you touched on this, but I'd love to go back to you to talk a little bit more about your instructional model. What's the secret sauce? What are you doing that really helps these students? Because in some of our chats, you talked about it's going well, right?
Right, absolutely. It is going very well. This year in particular, because we have designed it in such a way where it's not as rigid, but it's definitely rigorous, but it's not as rigid as it was in the past year. And it gives the students an opportunity for them to move at their pace more so than just like a running and ongoing content that has everybody on the same line and everybody moving at the same pace. That doesn't work. So this gives them an opportunity to use their skill sets and pace themselves, and gives the teachers opportunities to use supplemental materials and you're like doing group projects and that sort of thing in order for everybody to be engaged and differentiating instructions and that sort of thing, so that they won't feel the pressure to match what their constituents are doing. So.
Yeah, thank you, Marvis. Dan, how do you think about this? What do your students look like in the Metro Phoenix area?
It's a very diverse crowd. As you pointed out, socioeconomically, we're certainly not at 100%. We sit around the mid 40 in there, so it's not perfect in that way. Because I would love to be in those models, and I know I'd like to go out and see Marvis, and see what we can do together and how to get hybrid working in every single environment. Because I said I truly believe it is the answer. Some form of it, into my opinion, has to be the answer. But I think, keeping in mind that control is the lowest form of leadership we can do. So, and that's the way traditional schools typically are kind of built, with a lot of controls, lots of inputs, and not a lot of focus on outputs. So in where we are, and in Marvis's situation as well, because I know I've been out there a lot, is that focusing on the outputs in the situation is really the game-changing experience for this. When you don't control all the areas, including your teachers, like, for example, our teachers, transparency needs to be at the center of it. And if transparency means you have to have a good online curriculum that feeds you data back, and it also has to have curriculum that your teachers can use and they can immediately implement it in the classroom, so that kids need to be able to see it. Teachers have to have that transparency. Parents have to be able to see it. And then when the teacher gets with students, they have to be able to give them, and our teachers have to have a minimum of a 2-week playlist where the kids know exactly what's happening for 2 weeks, parents know what's happening for 2 weeks, and then you get in and then we all work together on individual, collaborative, any kind of group work that we do together. Those pieces, that crosses any stream that you're into, right? So that transparency, where you don't say we have all the control and you have none, is what engages kids. I have found over the years, no matter what socioeconomic group we're dealing with, giving them that control with incredibly high levels of support are what make that right. And in the digital side of things, being able to adjust that, you have to have a curriculum that you can go in, remove things, add things, adjust it, and be able to do the amount of touches that you need in a digital format, but in reaction to what you're seeing face to face. So those two really have to play together. And like I said, it doesn't matter where you land, it needs a local adjustment based on who you're with. But that hybrid path is the one that's going to help us lay a foundation and not have our teachers lecturing and delivering content that kids are going to ignore anyway.
I love the line that you said about what'd you say? Control is the lowest form of leadership?
It truly is. Yes, it is.
I'm going to use that. Thank you for those thoughts. Okay, we've got some questions rolling in, which is great, and we are going to touch on them. We're going to start with what is a good challenging question, and I'm going to content you. You mentioned you'd like to take this one from Kathy, and I see you commented already, but I wonder if you could share over audio and video.
Sure. So I was just offering my yes and in terms of this issue of not having inclusive language, racial equity, and historical fact included in current, many current online curriculum programs. Like it's one to find quality online curricula, right? To actually find something that's rigorous enough, that is flexible enough, that teachers can scaffold it and do differentiated instruction from it. That's one. And that's a challenge right there. And then two, on top of that, to have inclusive language, person-centered language in there, and issues of racial equity, stories that align to many different cultures and experiences. And so I just was calling out the notion that this is not limited to online curriculum, but still brick and mortar curriculum with all the additional changes. But what I will say is something that was touched on a moment ago. Melissa mentioned this in terms of how online and hybrid learning also can be used to help teachers. And that one of the things I experienced in online teaching settings is this ability to use effective polling tools, in-app solutions to be able to start to query students and engage them in the lesson to get their feedback. A lot of times when I didn't feel like the story we were focusing on, I'm a reading endorsed and English teacher by trade. And so one of the things I would do is speak to them about, well, let's rewrite the story, making it an exercise, put yourself in this story so that the students start to see themselves in the curriculum where they're lax, but still allowing them to engage in that curriculum in a meaningful way, changing the name of characters. And then from then on, the name of the character is not Catherine, but it's Dwayne, or it's a name that's familiar to them. It's it's Tan, it's all these other names that start to help them see themselves in the literature or in the story. Certainly not a perfect solution, but definitely something that I think online curriculum companies continue to strive towards to improve in that area.
Yeah, and that's something. Oh, sorry, John.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just going to tag on to that a little bit. From a strong mind perspective, we've worked really hard to update our curriculum and make it not only age appropriate, but also inclusive of all the diversities and different populations of learners. And so you'll see that in our curriculum. And it's something that we're able, as we write all of our own curriculum in-house, we're continuing to update and improve that as we go. So I just wanted to tag that on a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Marvis, I saw you added in the text, that's good, but I missed where that exactly came in. Was that something that Content was saying?
Yes, it was when she was referring to how it's designed so that it can will speak to any demographic or any socioeconomic stat or group, where they can use even like the names, something that they may be familiar with, that makes it not seem so foreign and more better received from the students. I love that.
Yeah. Melissa, another question came in. Are you able to talk to that, or would you prefer to answer in text?
I will. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I will, Kathy, can I follow up with you and send you some details about some of the improvements we've made specifically?
I think that would be great.
Yeah, I can give you some more details about the text, as we're always updating those, but I would love to share, a lot more detail than we have time for today.
All right. Another question came in about creating cohorts of students. And I think there's a couple of ways that we could take that one. Dan, you wanna, how do you think about that?
What is the direct question? I'm sorry, John, what's the?
Oh, it was up there a bit. The question that came in was, how are you creating cohorts of students?
Yeah. So it's interesting. We just got done revamping our cohorts as well. And I would say our version of cohorts. How about that? I will give you our version of cohorts. For us, we just recently selected our mascot as we are the Knights of Valor. And so we have orders of knights here in Valor. So students are given a mentor and linked in with other students, and we group them by some part of it by need, but mix them in. So all kids are there, whether they crush their NWEA or whether they're doing great in Strongmind or whether they're struggling. The groups are not bluebirds and blackbirds. Everybody's together, but we also divvy them up by the amount of attention a teacher can give them and the amount of support their peers can give them. So we looked at it in two ways for and I believe this is what they mean by cohorts. We have created sections of kids where they support each other, they compete with each other for tasks that build leadership and build community. And prizes include banners in the hallway and the trophies and things like that to help them feel part of a team, but also part of the Knights of Valor as well. And again, this is what our flexible schedule is offered to us. Like I have my afternoons to work with. We have our Fridays, which they actually don't have physical school on Fridays. They have tutoring and club days. It's those things that we have found building cohorts. You need time to be with them. And the hybrid schedule allows for that time once you build it into it. Once you put on the table, like, I need these cohorts, I need this group together. That's what it's going to allow you. And if that's important to you, then as you look at your hybrid schedule, and I can share you ours if whoever asked the question, to what we did with it, we put everything on the table and said, what are the most important elements to us? And then we elevated those and said, that's how our schedule is going to be built right there.
Thank
And
you.
so, and if that cohort, was there something else directed to that cohort? Is there another type of cohort we're talking about?
No, that was the extent of that question. There's a follow-up. Marvis, I see you nodding. I don't know if you want to touch on either cohort or the second question or comment from Peter. But if you want to talk about cohort, that's fine too.
Yeah. I'll just touch that part because I didn't see the second part of the question. I agree with Dan that there's a certain way that we do things here at Valor, Ohio. It's an overall team approach. And although there's individual competition and where we celebrate these individuals for their accomplishments, we still have an overall building-wide team approach. So everybody rises at the same time, everybody's celebrated. And I don't want to give the impression that it's just like that, everybody gets a trophy no matter what you do, sort of thing. Is not that. It's we're making one another better by pushing one another and supporting one another. So I wholeheartedly agree with that approach that Dan was speaking about, the team approach.
I thank you, Marvis. I want to Peter, who'd asked that question, I'm going to insert an editorial comment here while you four look at some of these other questions that have come in. So Peter has to follow, or more of a comment, looking at implementing changes within brick and mortar buildings in terms of schedules, moving from being teacher-centered to student-centered. I know we have a fair number of folks from some traditional districts, brick and mortar, fairly large districts. And one of the things that that I would say, having observed this field for 20 plus years, this work tends to be more successful when you start it small in areas where students and teachers and school leaders are making the choice to opt into this work, as opposed to trying to do it district wide. And I have a lot of examples of that. And if for anyone who's familiar with disruptive innovation theory out of the Christensen Institute and the book Disrupting Class, and the work more broadly across different sectors, not just education, really points to this as well. And there's lots of reasons that the type of change that Dan and Marvis in hybrid schools and Content in her online schools, these are all changes that are much easier to implement in this opt-in option. Dan, you want to comment on this? You're looking.
Yeah, I chomping at the bit on this one. So this was my passion. As much as I love the online version of school, in 2007, breaking a traditional school into and allowing online was a big deal. It is not a big deal now, but it was back then. But the goal was always to create flexible learning environments so that traditional learning gets challenged. So I will just give you my insights quickly with that. once I paid for my position as part of the superintendent's team, I moved into getting in charge of the coaches, and then we created those cohorts of teachers, and I tried it several ways. We did a group of teachers. We took teachers from all over the school. We tried blended learning and found out they all wanted to be inside a box, no matter what. So I'm like, okay, no more box, no more teaching a box. And blended learning was 3-station rotation, had to go like this. And the teachers just wanted to be in a box. I said, okay, I'm not doing that again. My next move was a flexible learning cohort, and I would love to share that with anybody who would like to see it, because it took a lot of my life, and I think it was worthwhile. In Pennsylvania, in a traditional school, we took 6 teachers at a time, and I took a month worth of professional learning. They were still in their classes, but once a week during that time, I would meet with them and my coaches, and we would work over the curriculum. All they had to change was one unit into a flexible learning. They were going to do in flexible learning cohort 1, and then we do 2 and do it faster. But they were only allowed to see the kids 3 days a week. They had to offload the material to online, which with formative assessments. And the result of this is what brought me to Arizona. Teachers don't have time to build curriculum and to create formative assessments. And then the cognitive load is too high. And then they pass that load on to the students, and it's too high. The cost is too high of the teacher. And as you said, you get a coalition of the willing first, John, and then you move to people who are a little more challenging. But that move, it's what brought me out to Arizona, because I saw Strongmind had the curriculum with lesson plans built into it. So the hybrid lesson plans are there. So every time they do something in Strongmind, the lesson plan would go with it. And so that's why I got the sandbox here out in Arizona and in Ohio, where the students can tap into that. They don't have to use it, but they can be inspired by it. But that move right there of changing the traditional classroom, I highly recommend those cohorts. Start small, as John said, and I can send you our entire template that we use, my coaches and I. It was very effective, in my opinion. And again, if you believe in memes, they see it, they see the teachers around them change. They will replicate that in their own way, but based on something positive that grows. And that's meme theory by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. If anybody wants that, actually, too, I'll send it to you.
Dan, while you were talking, Peter clarified, because I had assumed larger district, and he clarified for us, not a larger district, small district, 550.
Oh,
I still think it holds though.
even better. No, it's better. What are you
Well,
talking about?
it's easier to implement, but still the idea that you're doing as a subset, for all the reasons that you're talking about, I think it still holds.
Absolutely. Let's get into it, Peter. I'll take you on, man. Let's do it.
So I'm gonna request that our behind the scene producers make sure that we have the opportunity to be in touch with Peter after this, so that Peter, we can have some follow up about your questions in here. So let's see. Content, Melissa, I've probably been talking too much. I want to see if either of you want to weigh in on any of these topics.
Well, I had posted in the chat a clarifying question for Chanel, where I saw this, what I call the secret sauce: funding formula, innovative school leadership policy, itemized budget items, educator buy-in, parental support, and effective curriculums. Those are indeed the secret sauce for any of the changes that we would propose in terms of hybrid flexible learning. But then I was asking for clarification as to whether you wanted us to speak to how any one of those, how we would approach or have approached any one of those in order to move forward. And I'd start off by saying paramount in that is innovative leadership. If the leadership doesn't align to it, then it's very difficult to move forward from there, right? It starts with those leaders in the building and in the district thinking outside of the box, and even being willing to entertain and start that first pass of changing the master schedule. I can't tell you, of my administrative duties, the one that I least liked was the bell schedule and the master schedule build every year. It was just really challenging, but I also understood that those two tasks really allowed me to implement some of that flexible learning in a way that allowed students to have what they needed. But as a leader, certainly it was challenging to sit through those hundreds of permutations of schedule. Oh, wait, this teacher's not available. Oh, wait, you don't have anybody to cover that class that you wanted to offer that block. And figuring out the bell schedule before you even get to the curriculum is indeed daunting. And that starts at the level of the leader to innovate and to work with their leadership inner circle to start to build that schedule that allows you to start to deal with other things. And that does tie to funding and budget. If you don't have a body to cover that new schedule, you just don't have that person. And so certainly there are limitations to doing so, but I wanted to make sure we were speaking to specifics around the comment so that we can really give our insights. But I will allow having the staffing is, and you have to sometimes be creative about how you build your blocks. Are you going to do 45-minute segments? Are you still meeting seat time requirements? All of those concessions and considerations make it very difficult to build that schedule. But typically once you get past that first thing, I found it to be a bit easier to address some of the others like staff buy-in, et cetera. But those are my thoughts.
Incredibly useful. And you got more applause.
You're killing it, Content. Killing it.
At the risk of sounding like I'm going back to the same point over and over, which I tend to do, that long list of things that came in the chat and the content you just mentioned goes back to why I so strongly believe that the way to move forward in this type of work has to be within a choice environment, even if that choice environment is a school within a school within a traditional district, because you need all those elements to say yes. And if any one of those elements says no, then that will sink a district-wide effort. And so what I believe you have to have is the ability to say to, let's say, the parent who says, no, that's not what we want, to be able to say, well, then you don't have to opt into this. This is if you think this is a better option for your kids.
Yeah, and John, I would just add to that. I think, don't forget, especially if you're in a traditional school, you change is, your structure can only handle so much change. It's just not gonna, it's just, as much as I wanted to when I started in 2007 and doing this, I wanted to change everything. It's just not realistic. You have to work within the framework that you have. And there's amazing teachers in your buildings who want to do this kind of stuff. That coalition of the willing is ready to get out there. And if you praise them and show them and put them out in front and show them what they can do in those cohorts of teachers, I think you'll be amazed at what can happen by doing that. But just start, like you said, start small and grow, prove it, and have kids knocking down the door to get in, and parents knocking down the door to get in that school within a school. And you say, okay, that will eventually turn into what you need it to be.
Yeah, love it. One of the questions that came in during the registration, somebody asked about grading and feedback and what systems you all use. And Marvis, I think I'll go to you first. Can you talk about, because I know it's really central to, well, it's central to everybody's model, including the online schools, well, all the work that Content has done. But in one sense, where Dan's hybrid model, I just think of one of the big differences around the use of time. The
Right.
Ohio Valor model is a lot more, like, part of the difference is the use of data, which of course is grading and feedback. So and you touched on this earlier, but I wonder if you could build on it.
Yeah, certainly. So with the Strong Mind curriculum, it enables our students and teachers to have real-time feedback, real-time results, and they use that and they compare it with what the preliminary testing that was done, and do that a few times throughout the year. And we weigh the pros and cons, see what has worked and what hasn't worked. But the most pivotal part and most important part, I think, is the fact that there is real-time results, like for in terms of grading whatever the student is doing, and it'll tell them whether they have successfully mastered something or whether they need to continue, the teacher needs to reteach or what have you. So that you specify what needs to be done from any day-to-day point. So
One thing I would add, I'm going to tell you a very brief story about a failure that I had as a leader and administrator. And it was central leadership, right? We had decided one year to try mastery-based grading, okay, using the online curriculum that was asynchronous and synchronous learning. And so the way that we designed it, and I'm telling this story to talk about grading policy, is that we said that learners could participate in the classroom, but they would have asynchronous, multiple, unlimited attempts to complete. You guys are laughing because you know I'm going with interim assessments and to complete work that was being used to collect progress monitoring data. And as you can imagine, that really gave us a gut punch when it came time to grading and producing actual grades. And so there are some lessons there when you look at hybrid learning, asynchronous offline work, and mastery-based grading in particular, letting the students, we were trying to increase the at-bats, different schools have thought around how to do that, but the net was it didn't work because we didn't have progress monitoring data. And when it came time to do interim assessments, because the kids were at various levels of their mastery-based journey, you couldn't really align and use your data in a meaningful way to find trends because, oh, student A and B were at, lesson 8 of 10, and students C and D were at lessons 2 of 10. And so when you look at hybrid models and you look at your grading policy, certainly I feel like by telling you some of my failures, because we all have them, right? I can speak to how there are some things that will work and some things that really won't work if you're looking at implementing them and aligning them with your standards-based mastery tracking. So I wouldn't advise it from my perspective, but we definitely learned a lot about how to give students that autonomy as it relates to mastery-based grading, but in a different way than unlimited time. Yeah.
That's good.
I want to, more applause.
It's okay. Nope.
I need to go play the lottery after this.
I'm starting to think that you're applauding for yourself.
I'm starting to think there's family out there. That's what
I'm gonna answer with my hands like this from now on.
We got a question that I'll touch on briefly about experience with working with state, although if anybody else wants to jump in, please do, but experience working with state departments of ed and requirements for instructional hours with the questioner saying, look, it's restricting innovation in her state. My answer to that is, yeah, it's a major problem in a lot of states still. Where our folks are working in states that have some flexibility in some form or fashion, and there are still too many that don't have that flexibility. One thing that I'll add, sometimes we're seeing hybrid schools work through different channels to get a different designation. So for instance, in my home state of Colorado, you can go find on the Colorado Department of Education website a very long list of online schools, fully online schools. That's what they're called. And then you can go to the building that houses these quote unquote online schools and watch students coming in every day. Because the way that these schools get around the instructional time requirements is by saying we're an online school. And there are certain things that they have to do that. But so in Colorado, a lot of hybrid schools are officially considered hybrid schools. I've seen some things around things like alternative campuses as well. We're now at the point where across the country, 35 roughly states have some provision for at least some provision for waiving or having alternatives for instructional minutes and student attendance requirements. So it very, very, very state specific question though. I'll pause and see if any of the panelists want to weigh in on any of that before we move on.
I would say in our state, we have the same, right? 240 minimum, but the minutes change by grade level. And so some of the ways that we've been able to, in my prior experience, get around that is by still having the student show as registered for the class, but offering mastery-based criteria. So if a student is at an 80% or better mastery, then they can participate asynchronously because we're online school. And so that asynchronous participation minutes can also be counted. If you have the user interface that allows you to log their time in the interface, then you can count those minutes rather than live, like in this format with an instructor. So that's one of the ways that we approached addressing that very restrictive seat time requirement to log hours they've been online at say 8 or 9 o'clock at night, but the student was still engaged in the learning environment, has been my experience.
Content, that's such a great point. Your points are always great, and I'm not even applauding here.
Wait, let me put my hands up.
But the point being, there are these, the point I'm trying to get myself to here, there are these requirements from state education agencies, which in some cases can be incredibly cumbersome, but can be dealt with the right data system. Whereas if you're trying to deal with spreadsheets and email, basically, it turns into a nightmare really, really, really fast. And not just a nightmare really fast, but real impacts on funding if you're on something like an ADA or a minutes funding system.
I know, John, when I started in 2007, much to the chagrin of my superintendent at the time, I just made an appointment with the Deputy Secretary of Education and said, this is what we want to do. Like, what do you think about this? I mean, how do you react? I didn't want to be the guy, who created a position and then got fired within the first week that is breaking laws. And believe it or not, they were actually very receptive to it. They're like, if you read the law correctly, it says you have to offer 990 hours and you have to, do this much, but the word offer was the most important part. And how you got across that was like, okay, to make sure you document all the time they're on, the amount of the requirement, if they're following what interventions you put in place, go there with a well-documented plan. And, I still don't think the vague forgiveness model is ideal, but I in that case, just come with a good plan, offer it and say, hey, what do you think about this? Are you going to be okay with this? And then, if you stand by students, I think you stand a decent chance.
Yeah, it's a great point. A lot of this operates in gray areas of education code, and that relationship with the folks who are interpreting code is incredibly important. Melissa, I'm going to see if you have comment on this before I do that. I mentioned we are at 10 minutes to the top of the hour. So folks, if you've got more questions, now is the time to get them in. We're about 6 minutes from our final lightning round comments. So if you have any other questions or comments, get them in now. Melissa.
Yeah, I just wanted to add from a strong mind perspective. And when we work with our schools, we work in 32 states right now, and we really take full responsibility for making sure you have the data that you need for some of these instructional hours and data and reporting. Our goal is to make sure you guys get what you need. So we've been able to work around, but with school districts to provide them some of this reporting that they need around minutes and seat time and those types of things. So we build custom reporting. Our system has a lot of that built in there, but based on state need, we really work together with the school district to get them the information they need. Thank
you. Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about, right? You got the right system, you can do it.
Yeah.
We have about 17 different topics that I listed that, of course, I didn't expect to get to because there's so much to dig into in all these, and we're getting a lot of really good questions. But in our remaining 5 minutes or so before we go to lightning round, I want to touch on one of these. Dan, you touched on this earlier. Actually, Marvis, you did too. Just the idea of the importance of relationships in your Valor Schools, Content, the work that you've done, and Melissa, I know StrongMind is supporting those relationships as well, both in terms of the relationships that students have with teachers and in some schools, other professional adults. It's such a misunderstanding, probably not among a lot of our attendees. We got the folks that I've seen a fair bit of experience. I think they get some of this, but still, I think it's worth talking about. So I'm just going to put it out there if one or a couple of you could talk about relationships in the schools that you are or have worked in.
I can do it. I can talk about that. Well, I've had like several years being a site coordinator with communities and schools, and we have been able to, I would say privileged to be able to meet some of the needs of our students, whether it be food, whether it's clothing, housing, mentoring. And so the reason why we're able to have that much success now and even then is because of the relationships that have been built. Before you can even try to engage a student with academics, you have to have that buy-in and let them know that you genuinely care, that they're there. I would venture to say that majority of our students here would not even show up if it were not for that relationship that they have either with myself or with the teachers. And in addition to that, we partner with professionals throughout the community to come in and mentor our students and be like big brothers and big sisters as well. So that's, I wholeheartedly agree with that relationship part of that being as important as it really is.
And I would like to add, if I may, one way to back up that idea of introducing this innovation and these changes to your community is I encourage district administrators to consider times where there's low risk, high reward options for innovating, such as your summer school sessions. Summer school sessions aren't required to be full day. It's a great test case for when you can implement a hybrid model. Try some of that out because you don't have as much risk. It's a lower student population and you can be flexible in your scheduling. Oftentimes not having to run a full day, but trying some of those modalities, right? Having the kids do some station work where they're online or asynchronous for part of that time. And it allows you to collect data, which is really important when you're trying to get stakeholder buy-in, either from the communities, from your board, for example, who's, you know, maybe not so keen on what you're wanting to offer. And so I encourage you all to think of innovative times during the school year to try out some of this flexible style of learning and to really collect data on, you know, we had this percentage attended, this percentage mastery. We were able to have students give their feedback, you know, and the ways that they enjoy this. So there are many ways to build that relationship and build some preemptive support of the changes that you'd like to make for the coming school year or years.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. That's exactly where I started. They asked me to take over summer school and they were teaching them exactly how they failed them and then charging them money for it for a group that is struggling socioeconomic. It was a wretched experience.
Yes.
And that was 2006 when they asked me to take it over. And 2007 is when I began the journey. And that's exactly, I was like, why don't we build on what they know? And the online can do that for you. And then the relationship comes after that. So really looking at the value of the humans and the content, what we can leverage. It's just, you're right. Summer school is exactly where everyone should start.
See, I'm not going to give myself applause, John.
I did it. That was my last one. The last one was mine, by the way.
All right. Well, we are just about out of time. I see another question coming in, but unfortunately, I want to make sure we close on time. So I'm going to ask our producers to make sure we get some follow up for the question that just came in. We're going to do lightning round. I'm going to start with Melissa in a moment. 30 seconds on what you would like to leave our audience with. Melissa, you first.
Yeah, it's just so much of like trying to put together all the pieces from the panelists that did such a great job. The buy-in and then supporting the innovators and then also helping them get buy-in to the district. So when I go in, a strong mind or anybody on our team does, a lot of times I'll get a really aggressive superintendent who says, I want to buy this. And I'm like, okay, well, let's slow down and get the right people at the table here. Who's going to implement this for you? And what problems are you trying to solve? So it sounds weird, but we like to slow it down, make sure all the stakeholders are there and we're really helping you build a solution for what you're trying to solve.
Thank you, Melissa. Marvis going next as we get, by the way, we're putting contact information up on the slide for all our attendees if you'd like to follow up with any of our fantastic panelists. But Marvin, lightning round question. What do you want to leave everybody with?
We can all agree that what has been done for the past 200 years has not been effective in terms of brick and mortar, the same brick and mortar style and the same fundamental approach to education. So thinking outside the box, getting community involvement, allowing the teachers to have autonomy. I heard Content say that, autonomy to use their skill sets and their various ideas in order to differentiate instruction and allow the students to move at their pace within reason, of course. I think it's a win-win. We can't do what we've always done, so we have to change it up. And that takes everybody having that same amount of buy-in.
Love it. Thank you, Marvis. Dan.
Yeah, 100%. What everyone said, I would, at the risk of copyright infringement, honestly, hybrid is the way, guys. It just is. I think it asks the user, the school, the administrator, the homeschool, the micro school, asks that tough question. What's the power of the human in your situation and what do you need out of the online side of it? And then build all schedules, all systems around that question, those questions right there. What do the humans need in this situation? And remember that, putting a drone together and having it drop over, that's very complicated work. What we do is complex, very complex work that requires you to ask the real tough questions of how do we get this to the end user who is the student and what are the tools we need to do it.
Thank you, Dan. Content, you get the last word.
Okay, well, so for me, I think it all starts with your plan and your strategy. I believe in writing a good strategic plan, but not the nuts and bolts that you send off. The one that you write where you say, here are the things that I'd like to do. Just like you did in the chat today, you list your limitations and you challenge your leadership team to come up with answers. You poke holes in it, you tear it apart. Once you have that plan that you think is solid, then you bring your teachers in, engaging them in the answers. Well, what about this? Here's our solution. So that you start to build that buy-in before you ever implement your plan. And then, as I said, looking with an eye to inclusivity and those communities that are not often addressed, building in that feedback, because all of us have district feedback on our low SES and disabled populations. And so I would say, make sure when you're doing that planning, preload their needs into the plans that you're writing so that you don't have to go back, as a lot of districts do, and on the back end, try to build in the differentiated instructions, the needs of special needs learners, etc., EL students. Put that at the top of your list for planning so that you keep them and encapsulate them on your way forward, would be my advice.
Fantastic. I gave you applause for that, Content.
I did
Actually,
too.
I gave you all applause. Folks, fantastic conversation. To all the folks who joined us, thank you so much. Thanks for the great questions and conversation. Our producers will be in touch with a quick thank you. And if you have additional questions, please let us know. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody.